Alfred Brendel, un homme grand au regard bleu, aux doigts souvent recouverts de sparadrap. Né en Autriche, il vit maintenant à Londres, dans le village de Hampstead. Il a étudié avec les plus grands, Paul Baumgartner, Edward Steuermann, Edwin Fischer. Sa renommée vint tard. Il avait sans doute le temps et d'autres affections. C'est un maniaque, un chercheur qui explore inlassablement les textes. Un grand interprète, un grand musicien, un écrivain aussi. Dans les réflexions faites qu'il livre à l'éditeur, il cite une phrase de Liszt à propos de Schubert. « Je crains que ton charme, qui est si grand, ne fasse presque oublier la grandeur de ta musique. » Tout au long de cet opus, Brendel nous prouvera le contraire.
think there is a valedictory air, but it doesn't mean that Schubert knew that he would die. He probably had the feeling that he would eventually die because he was a sick man. But the sickness that killed him, the typhoid fever, came after he finished this sonata. And I do not think there is any reason to take them as a final message.
Why do you think this need to write trilogies, both with Schubert, Beethoven, and Mozart?
I don't know whether it was a need, but it sometimes happens with great composers that they write several works at once. And I was always interested to find out what happens if this is the case, whether the works are particularly clearly set apart, or whether they are sharing, whether they form a family. Now, they are very clearly set apart in their character. Each movement is defined and is different from each other movement, but the material overlaps. There is a give and take. And not a give and take of a very systematic sort. If we think of certain Beethoven sonatas where all the material is there at the very beginning of the piece, like the Appassionata, where everything can be derived from there, this is not the case in Schubert's last sonatas. It is a more arbitrary way of taking advantage of the beginning of the C minor sonata later on, probably without knowing. This is not necessarily a matter of knowing that one does things. It is a matter of the blooming of a composer's imagination. And it is very interesting to see how it blooms and how the composer proceeds critically at the same time. So I give you an example first from Mozart's symphonies. Two themes from two different symphonies. And the next one. And now a third one from the third symphony, where these themes actually derive from. It's the beginning of the E-flat symphony. There are many other connections of a similar kind.
And to the Schubert sonatas?
The motivic relations are spilling over like in the Mozart symphonies and in Beethoven's last sonatas. And it is a matter of variance rather than of literal quotation. There are certain areas where things happen. For instance, the area of the diminished fifths. Now, if we look at the sonatas, there are many themes that take advantage of this area and start within it. If I give you a chain of examples to show you what I mean, I would like to play them in the same key, or rather in the same range, A major, F sharp minor range, to facilitate listening. I shall start with the diminished fifths formula and go on from there. back to the beginning. What I just did was a kind of developing variation. Hidden connections are more important than obvious ones, to quote Heraclitus. That, I think, applies to musical form as well. There are some very obvious quotations in music, and they do not mean very much for the overall structure because they are too obvious. The beginnings of two of the sonatas are indicative, I think, for Schubert's late style. One of them, the A major, starts in the first draft like pure choral writing and reminds us of the E-flat Mass that was composed at the same time. The other one, the B-flat sonata, opens in a mysterious way a kind of third dimension. There is a very solemn, tender statement, and the statement then is provided with a trill in the bass, a very soft trill, very far away. There have been different interpretations of this trill. It was called a disturbing element. It was called a movance, something that moves on different to the quietness of the theme. I prefer to see it as the opening of a new dimension. There is no break of continuity. The music continues. But what happens in this rest is that there is a rapport established between music and silence. Now, this trill has also a formal function. The notes G sharp and F are very important in the later course of the movement and of the whole sonata. The main theme is immediately stated in G flat. The next theme is introduced in F sharp minor. The development starts in C sharp. The slow movement is in C sharp. So there is a combination of psychological and formal elements, as there should be in all good music. One of the characteristics of Schubert's music is his need of space. It has been criticized for a long time. People thought his music was too long. And I think he needs the space. And there is very good evidence in the drafts for the last sonatas, in which way he draws on space in order to express himself more clearly and in order to get the proportions right. I give you an example of the lyrical theme of the first movement of the A major sonata in the first draft and afterwards in the clean copy. Now the final version. think that Schubert sounds obsessionally long only where it should express an obsessional state of mind.
But did this have something to do with the period too? Because when you compare the Schubert sonatas, the last Schubert sonatas to the preceding masters such as Haydn or Mozart or Beethoven that you were just mentioning, it is really extremely different, isn't it, in form?
The concept of form has changed. For Haydn, it was a kind of roaming around, of springing surprises in a very succinct way. Mozart's form is a constant proof of a perfection that seems to have no aim or constraint. Beethoven's form is a triumph of order over chaos, also a triumph of bringing together the form and what it has to express. Now these classical forms define boundaries. Schubert's form is of a very different kind. It rather opens up something. It is a matter of propriety. It is a veil of order, to quote a word by Novalis, under which the chaos shimmers, the most beautiful musical chaos that I know. And it is this frame of mind which we appreciate much better, I think, than the people in the 19th century. We have gone through the experience of listening to Bruckner and Mahler to be able to take in vast musical spaces next to which Schubert almost seems economical.
How would people have reacted at this period to these works?
Schubert's Vienna was ready to accept Schubert's songs. He was also fortunate to have a singer, Vogel, with whom he performed the songs in private houses, not in concert halls. And they were a great success. Many of them have been published, and many of the forehand pieces have been published because there was a demand. There was no demand for sonatas at that time because Beethoven had done them already. This was not really a romantic form. And Schubert, after all, was a very young composer when he died at the age of 31, and people thought he needed more time to get himself together. They thought his sonatas were sprawling, they were too long, they were too adventurous, if they knew them at all. There were a few comments on the three printed sonatas in newspapers, but I don't think anybody played them, apart from Schubert. I'm not sure that he heard any other pianist play these sonatas, even in a private house, so that he could react to what he wrote down. There was no tradition. He himself was not a virtuoso. He was not a teacher who would give other people an idea how these pieces should be played. His instrumental music generally was rather unknown for a very long time, even to his friends and admirers. Only during the 19th century, some of the important works came to light, like the C major symphony. That was first performed in Leipzig by Mendelssohn, but with cuts. Schumann had been a great admirer of Schubert. He had written him up in his musical periodical glowingly. There were certain works that he liked very much, but unfortunately the last sonatas disappointed him. And it is this judgment by Schumann, I think, that has been responsible in part for the neglect of these works until deeply into our century. And it was Arthur Schnabel particularly who brought them to light and who recorded some of them, who defended them, who told the people that Schubert is not just a lyrical composer who composed pieces which were too long, but that they are intensely dramatic, who knew that they were very different to Beethoven and could play them that way.
Schubert has very often been compared to Beethoven in a rather depreciatory manner.
The concept that Schubert modeled his sonatas on Beethoven's and failed prevailed well into our century, and I think it is a mistake to see him from that angle. People thought Beethoven had composed sonatas once and for all, and looked in the sonatas of others for Beethoven's virtues. And of course, if you do that with Schubert, you don't find them. You find them full of flaws, because Schubert consciously was different from Beethoven. He admired him very much, he knew his works, but this taught him to be different. He was strong enough to be so. And somebody who realized this, one of the few people at the beginning of the century, was Arnold Schönberg, who said so in the draft of a little article, that next to a crushing figure like Beethoven, Schubert was able to maintain his individuality to the last detail. And his self-confidence was so enormous that he could stand this crushing neighborhood. In his C minor sonatas, he relates to Beethoven more overtly than before, and yet it's a very different piece to Beethoven's style. It has often been said that the beginning may have been triggered off by the theme of Beethoven's C minor variations. Now here is the beginning of Schubert's C minor sonata. The connection is an air of defiance. The difference is that Beethoven's defiance is well organized. It is a collected energy, an energy that follows musically a certain pattern, which I call foreshortening. The music is more and more densely organized until the end, and it gives the listener a sense of security. What Schubert does is he seems to start in the manner of foreshortenings, but the foreshortenings do not work. They go astray. They become nervously disordered. There is a sense of menace. I would say that Schubert's pathos in this sonata is steeped in fear. And the beginning of this work gives the clue to its basic character. It is really a work where the romantic wanderer becomes chaste and doesn't see a way out. It's a very desperate piece. It is behind its classicist facade, I think the most neurotic sonata Schubert wrote. And the last movement goes into an almost pathological direction in its desperate repeats of formulas, which are not empty formulas as the 19th century thought, but which graphically depict a state of mind that is very much that of a wanderer at a precipice. This is one of the main images that I have for Schubert. After all, wandering was the romantic condition. One wanders, one never arrives, at least not in this life. Happiness is where you are not. This is a line from Schubert's song, The Wanderer. And in Schubert's late music, there is a state of despair which no composer before has ever risked. There is a middle section in the slow movement of the A major sonata, which almost loses the sense of organization. It is like a mind that completely loses itself. It is a state of near chaos that I think has only been surpassed in some of Schoenberg's music of the so-called atonal period. Now I give you the beginning of this section, and again in two versions. And for once, I am very unhappy that Schubert changed his mind, because I think the version of the first draft is stronger than that of the clean copy. But it is so daring that Schubert probably at that stage did not want to keep it. A few years later he would have stayed with it. I play you first the version that we are used to. Now, in the first draft, one note is changed, and it makes a lot of difference. With this G major chord, the hallucinatory quality of this middle section is presented at one blow, unmitigated. Of course, it was not his wish to retain it, and so we are not playing it in concerts, but I always regret it.
Would Schubert actually have met Beethoven living in the same city?
If he met him, it was only in passing. They didn't know each other well. Beethoven knew some of Schubert's songs, which were brought to him by friends, and admired them very much in his latest years. I think Schubert rather intentionally was keeping to himself. His reverence was enormous. He helped to carry Beethoven's coffin. But he always knew that he was different, and that he had to do something that Beethoven has not done.
Do you think he would consciously have kept away from him, or he would have tried to have met him all the same? Or was he perhaps afraid of this?
He may have been afraid to meet him. After all, Beethoven was deaf. He had a circle of friends. He was very strange. He consumed quite a lot of alcohol, as we now know. I wouldn't say that Schubert didn't, but he had a very different circle of friends, mostly literary people, a few painters, but very harmless painters.
Is it true that Schubert, on his deathbed, asked to hear one of the Beethoven quartets, do you think? I think Opus 131?
Yes.
Which nobody else knew at that period?
It seems that Schubert did ask for a performance of the C-sharp minor quartet by Beethoven when he already was very ill, and it may have been his last musical joy. I'm sure he was one of the few people at that time to appreciate the work, because Beethoven's late works were thought badly about by many people. There was an enormous respect for Beethoven, but I think the main audience thought Beethoven has aged and has become a bit senile.
That he had gone too far.
Used up his energies, yes. Mm-hmm. Of course, we now know that this quality of Beethoven's music is one of the most precious ones. You are always confronted with an enigma. you never get really completely behind the riddle. I mean, he does not present the solution with the riddle like Mozart, to quote something Busoni said. There is always something enigmatic that stays. And we could say in a very different way the same about Schubert's late sonatas. I think Schubert's trilogy belongs together in a psychological way. If we look at the pieces, the C minor sonata gives an impression of menace and destructive energy. Then there is the antithesis of the A major sonata, a positive, luminous energy, and kind of synthesis in the B flat sonata of designed composure. The B flat sonata must be the most beautiful and harmonious of these pieces. It tallies most easily with the concept of a gently melancholic Schubert. The A major sonata, I think, is the most amazing and interesting. It presents the brightest world with the darkest counterpart. And the C minor sonata is disturbing, unsettling, and strangely remote in the slow movement, which has a quality of holy sobriety, if I want to use a word by Hölderlin, heilig nüchtern, which sets it apart from similar movements by Beethoven. If I listen to the beginning of this movement, if I compare this beginning with some beginnings in Beethoven's piano music in the same key, or another one, if I compare the Schubert opening with these openings of Beethoven, I feel that Beethoven presents declarations of love. There is a rapture in this music. There is a warmth and directness, whereas Schubert remains mysteriously remote. Now this is that strange quality in some of the late works, because otherwise I would dare say that Schubert is the most immediately moving of all composers. And he moves you not only with the chill of his dances of death, but also with something like the warmth and shelter of death, the enticement of death, its lure of surrender, its siren songs. And again I have to think of the death of his mother and of the merging of the two images. I feel that this is very special to Schubert, and it is obvious already in some of the early songs. If you look at the texts of his songs and how he composes them, usually minor keys represent the reality of life, and major keys the unobtainable ideal, the dream, something that is outside one's immediate reach.
Sont spécialement dans le grand